Good morning, bows and bow ties. I don't think this is going to be a long video, but I want to thank you for joining my channel. If you're new to my channel, I'm the Black opinionated woman, also known as a bow. So I'm going to come off camera because my light is on in the car, and I think it's kind of a distraction here at 5:07 a.m. Get this off. Okay, so let me just get on into it. I don't know what I'm going to rename this video, but I originally titled this Peace, Protection, and Performance, so I could just run this real quick. So I we constantly hear about how we're like protecting our peace and all this other stuff, but there comes a time when you actually have to practice that. You have to practice that. And I remember having a conversation with someone who looks like me at work, who's in a position of, I would say, semi-authority. And I remember watching her. Um, she's a highly competent person, but she was, it's hard to say. I would say that she was allowing others to take her out of herself. And when I say that, it was because she was getting excitable, she was getting angry, and she was willing to be combative. And I pulled her aside and I told her she needs to take some vacation time. And she was looking at me and she was telling me what she was willing to do. And I was like, no, no, no. You should take some vacation time. I'm not in a position of authority. I don't work for her. She doesn't work for me and nothing like that. But she's a great person. But I was watching how she was in her position and she was allowing a bunch of people who don't look like her to run her ragged. They were questioning her intellect, her authority, and you know, obviously she proved herself to be correct multiple times. But in the process, she was allowing herself to be beat up in the process. And I told her, you need to, when we talk about protecting our peace, that's just that. Sometimes we need to protect our peace. When you have people who are willing to take you out of who you are and run you down, and you're at the point where you're willing to show the side of you, you're willing to give them the other side that they don't even deserve. I was like, and that's when you have to check out, because what'll happen is people will use your talents. They will use your talents. They will use your body, use your talents, use your intellect. You will fight for what's right. You will fight for certain things, and then ultimately, you will you'll be the one who'll be worse for it, worse for the wear, right? You will be worn down. You will be you're the one. You're the one who's going to have the bitter taste in your mouth. And so I remember saying you have to protect your peace, like literally practice that now. And she wound up taking an extended period of time off, came back to work feeling much more refreshed. And she's very smart and she knows all these things, but sometimes you can get so caught up in the middle of shenanigans, and sometimes you have a blind spot and it's hard to see. And it just takes someone to say, hey, do you see what's happening? I remember sharing with a couple of coworkers something that my mother always told me. She told me years ago, you cannot deny people their process. And I understood it logically and maybe even intellectually, like in terms of like really understanding the sentiment. But as you get older, and sometimes the things that your parents tell you and teach you really start to understand. She said, you cannot deny people their process. And she used to say, when the pain gets deep enough, you are required to change. And I remember when I first learned that. Now, check this out. I understood it, but I didn't understand it. Like, I didn't get it until a little bit later. Like, I understood it, but it meant more when I had more life experience. She said, when the pain gets deep enough, you are required to change. She's like, because think about, because if you, like, okay, guys, like, just think about this. When you're at the point where you can't take it anymore, usually people are going to alleviate that stress, that pain, right? So what does that look like? It can be good or bad. Some people may turn to drugs, alcohol, sex, uh, spending, like maybe just spending, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe some people, they do the opposite. They buckle down and suddenly they're like, screw it. Um, no more spending. You know what? I'm no longer going to be a hoe or a gigolo. I don't know. They're like, maybe I need to change jobs because this is too much or whatever, right? You do something, you affect some part of change in your life to alleviate that stress. And so my mom used to always say, when the pain gets deep enough, you are the one that's required to change. You will change. You will change. And so it's going to be either a good change or a bad change, right? Because whatever it is that is taken to a point where you can't take it anymore, you're going to do something to affect that change. Now, what you choose to do, that is separate. But she said at the end of the day, you cannot deny people their process. And so what you do is she said, you pray for the pain. Because if people don't want to listen and they don't want to change and do all these things, and I'll circle back to this scenario, see if that work. Well, then what you do is you got to let the pain come. You got to let it happen. You can't deny people their process. Some people, when they feel pain, they nip it immediately. Some people, they got to go all the way in the gutter. They got to go until they get that lesson. So she was like, you cannot deny people their pain. I mean, their process. Pray for the pain to come, and then they'll start to change. My mom used to always tell us all the time. Like, I remember she was telling my sister one time, like, when she was dating this guy, and she was just kind of like, he will get rid of you before you get rid of him. She was like, so I pray for the pain since you don't want to listen, because you got to live your own life. And when you're tired, you're going to do something different. So I hope the praying comes sooner rather than later, right? So that, you don't want to wait and go all the way in the gutter. But if that's what you need in order to get that lesson, so be it. She said, pray for the pain. And so let me circle back to my coworker. She was trying to do all these good things, these right things, and people weren't listening. And you know how people will try to usurp your authority, and people will try to engage in subversive behavior, or maybe, or whatever it is. And she was fighting so hard, and I was like, no. Sometimes you got to let it fall. I've been there. I know what it's like to fight, and you're right, and you're trying to prove a point, and you're like, not even to prove a point, you're like trying to do what's right, and people don't want to listen. There are other things at play, and then you have to learn. It took me a while, and I got there. I had to learn to get out of the way. I didn't realize I was getting to the point when I got out of the way, meaning I stopped fighting certain things. I was like, I didn't realize I was no longer denying others their process. They had to walk through things, right? So with this coworker, I remember she came back to work and she said, thank you for that. And I was like, they don't deserve for you to set it off on them. Sometimes you just got to let it be what it's going to be. I have learned to now document certain things, or just make sure it's known, like, hey, this is my concern about X, Y, and Z. And then I've learned to let things go because I am not in the right position to affect that sort of change. What I can do is call attention to certain things, and I can bring it to your attention, and with supporting information, and that's it. Because what I'm not going to do is take any of that home with me mentally, right? I'm like, hey, you're in this situation, make a decision. It's not for me. Here it is. I and I've learned to let things go most times. Look, we talk about earlier. I talk about how when you allow people to use you and this that, and the other. I just changed my daughter, or she just left a particular sports team, and there are parents there who I think there's certain things that they don't see or they're not aware of. Um, some of it is a blind spot on some of these parents, but I saw and noticed some things, and I just chose to remove my daughter from a situation, especially since she was one of the best ones on the team. I was talking with another parent. We both moved our children off of that team, actually to something much better, believe it or not, like hella better. Um, mine isn't official yet, but I think it's pretty official. But yeah, I think that one of the things I kept saying is there are several things that are important to me as a parent, right? And I want you to listen. The pain finally got deep enough. Um, when my daughter started getting more B's than she normally was, she's normally an A student, sometimes a B, but she started getting B's. And it's not that they're bad, but that is not her best effort. And I said, wait a second, because there was too much going on with this particular team in terms of how and when they were practicing. And I was like not happy with the fact that there is a cutoff. If practice is supposed to be an hour and a half, it should be an hour and a half. But then it was slipping to an hour and 45 minutes. Then it was slipping to 2 hours. Then it was 2 hours and 15 minutes. Then it was 2.5. I'm like, there's not that much practicing in the world for these young people. But not only that, it was getting to a point in time at night where I was like, it's too late. There were people who were willing to put up with certain things, but I was not. It was just not a healthy situation. But not only that, my daughter was one of the best ones on the team, along with another girl, and our daughters were being yelled at the most. Um, and I didn't like that, especially because they were working so hard. I didn't like the fact that when I said, look, practice ends at this time, so it needs to end. My daughter has to go home, she has to sleep, and school is important. And when one of the coaches tried to say something, and I'm like looking at like, well, whatever you guys do in your lifetime is one thing. But at the end of the day, my job is to parent my child. I got my child through the rest of the season. They had a pretty good season. But I recognized that, other people have moved their kids off before, but I said I had to move my child up and do what was best for my kid. The fact of the matter is, grades are important. She's a student athlete first. My husband coaches a team, and he makes sure that those young men are out of that out of practice timely because they're young students. And what I am saying in this moment is the pain got deep enough that I was willing to take her off the team before securing another spot on another team, because I said, this is just not it. Not it. This is not it. I'm not going to put her in a situation where this is an unhealthy situation. So the pain got deep enough. And actually the interesting thing is my daughter felt relief. She felt relief. And I don't think she realized she was carrying that tension. And I was just kind of like, so my job is to parent her. She ended up being in a situation where she's got other teams looking at her who are way better, like play a national schedule, and they're willing to, it looks like they want her to come be part of what they've got going on. And she's actually in the process of training now, like with at least one of the teams, but possibly the other. So where am I going with this? If you're going to protect your peace, you have to actively do it. You have to actively do it. And don't give them, anyone, a negative performance, because I found that I was getting snappy as like a member, as a parent on part of that team. There's other things that go along with it, that I don't need to speak to on here, that I didn't like, that there was a little bit of, I think, subconscious bias from the coach who happened to look like me, but I think there was some subconscious biases going on that I don't even want to get into it. Um, but I just found that I had to do what was best for me. And I think about it for my daughter, it's more so. I think about my coworker who had to do what was best for herself. And I said, protecting your peace means you have to actually actively protect it. And you don't have to perform for anybody, because what happens is when you're not protecting your peace, and you're coming out of who you are, and then you start performing good, bad, or indifferent because you are not at peace. So that's my Bo thought for the day. It wasn't probably the prettiest, but I think you understood the sentiment. And hopefully you're taking this opportunity to send this to all of your friends. Send it to all of your friends. I'm going to come on for 2 seconds and say, hey, all right, I'm getting ready to get off of this, but this is a good opportunity for you to subscribe. Hopefully you liked what I had to say. Send it to all your friends. And until next time.